This is episode 60 with Traci Houston.
Welcome to Spot On Insurance. Join us each week as we speak to insurance professionals, attorneys, regulators, and compliance specialists on topics ranging from improving your agency to staying on the right side of the law. Subscribe and stay informed on the effects of new trends and disruptive emerging technologies on your businesses and your industry.
Traci Houston is a licensing and compliance specialist at ILSA with 12 years of experience specializing in insurance compliance. Traci has extensive knowledge in licensing and renewals for agents, brokers, adjusters, surplus lines brokers, TPAs, RPGs, and MGAs. While holding a job in the insurance industry, Traci worked her way through college and obtained a Bachelor of Arts in psychology, alongside working and being a full-time student and a young mom.
Tracy, welcome to Spot On Insurance.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here.
Tracy, can you give us a little insight into your career journey?
Sure. I started my career at the age of 19, right out of high school. I really didn't know what I wanted to do once I graduated. So someone had told me about a position at a really good company in Groesbeck, Texas, Insurance Licensing Services of America. And I went and applied, and it was the best thing that has ever happened to me.
Okay, Tracy, when you joined ILSA, what was your first impression?
The atmosphere was amazing. Everyone was so friendly, but the words that were coming out of their mouth were so confusing. I had no idea what they were talking about.
It was like another language?
It was crazy. And I just thought, I don't know that I could do this.
But obviously, 12 years later, you've done it and done it very well.
So tell us about some of the training that you received.
Well, I had very good trainers. They trained me extensively on licensing, renewals, registering agencies with the Secretary of State. I've worked with adjusters, agents, brokers, surplus lines brokers, TPAs, MGAs. And you could imagine, when you first come on and you hear all of those terms, you're like, what is going on? What is an adjuster? What are, what in the world does MGA stand for? What does RPG stand for? But I've, with good training and talking to the states and just doing everything to soak up this information, I've learned and have become pretty good at it. Being in this industry has given me a lot of opportunity to travel the world. I've been to many conferences, and I've been able to meet some clients face to face. It feels really good when you're able to build a relationship with someone over the phone and then put a face to the name. Some of the conferences that I've been to are the Big I. I've been to the Big I. We went to Washington, D.C., and I've been to SILA. And one of my favorites was the National Association of Insurance of Women.
Okay. And why was that one of your favorites?
Everyone was free and just excited to be there. I don't know. I really don't know. Like, we were in Arizona, and it was just so much fun to be around those ladies.
Tracy, you're working remotely now, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
Well, can you talk to me about some of the skills that allowed you to get to that point, what it took to get to working remotely?
Yeah, well, I worked for ILSA in their home office for like 10 years. And then my husband and I were relocated to the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And because of all of the vast skills that I had learned over the last 2 years, I've actually been able to work from home. We live in Fort Worth, and I can literally do my job from anywhere. As long as I have a computer, internet, and a phone, I'm really good to go.
Doesn't matter as long as, it's to have these skills, allows you to service any agency from anywhere. So what challenges have you faced in your career? I'm sure you've faced some.
There have been challenges, of course. I wouldn't say that insurance compliance is easy to do. It takes a lot of determination and diligence to learn all the state's requirements. And if you do know the insurance industry, you know that it's constantly changing.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not on top of your licenses, if you don't have a good tracking system in place, you can easily lose track of what licenses are due and when.
Absolutely. And how do you overcome a lot of these challenges? You mentioned that the states are constantly changing their regulations. How do you stay on top of that? I know that that's, one of the challenges that you face.
Yeah, the main thing that I keep in my book is to always ask questions and don't be afraid to call the state. Any challenges that I was ever faced with, I always ask questions to whoever they need to be asked to. So just like with any job, the state's regulatory offices, they have new employees and, even employees that have been there for a while, but like I said, a law changed or something. So it's new that they're having to learn. That person, may give the wrong information to someone. So, if you feel like you know something or like you think that, the answer that they have given you is not correct, then just question them and just ask, or can we look at that statute or can we go back to where it says that just so you make sure that you're getting the right information for your licensee.
So, in all your time that you've worked with the different states, has that happened often?
Yes, it does happen often. You might be nervous or intimidated to call the state and question something that they're telling you. However, it is okay to get clarification from the states in those instances. And you can even call and ask to speak with a supervisor who can explain things to you more clear. And then also, like, it doesn't just clear things up for that particular case, it teaches you for future reference.
Excellent. That's great. Tracy, I know that today our topic is going to be risk purchasing groups, and you're going to talk to us about getting a RPG licensed nationally. But first, I just want to touch upon the definitions of two areas where a lot of times they're confused, and they are very distinct. I'm going to first cover the definition for a risk purchasing group, which is actually any group of similar businesses that share common risk characteristics and who band together to purchase liability insurance. And they are purchasing it from the carriers, as opposed to a risk retention group, which provides liability insurance and is treated as an insurance company. And so an risk retention group has capital requirements. So I just wanted to make that distinction before we jump into RPGs.
So you've done every type of license application from PNC, surplus lines, adjusters, and MGAs. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the highest, how would you rate the complexity of RPG licensing?
I would say RPGs would be an 8.
Wow.
Why is it so complex?
Well, many states use the uniform NAIC RPG application, and there are some states that have a state-specific form, so you have to know which state requires which form. And then they require so much information. For example, you're not just providing information about the RPG itself, you're required to provide information about the administering agency that the RPG is going to be using and the agent who's going to be writing the policy. Plus, you have to know a detailed description of the RPG's activities. So, along with that information, you also have to know the classifications of the liability insurance that they're going to be purchasing.
Okay, and so to gather all that information, is it sometimes daunting for, you're probably dealing with a coordinator for an agency. So when you're asking them all this information, is that a daunting task for them?
It is because they have to go back to, usually one person doesn't know that information. So they have to go back to, several people within their entity to grab that information. So normally I'll send a spreadsheet with all the specific details that I need for these applications and have them go back and grab all that information for me.
And you're also having to gather information like on the different officers for the RPG. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, so each state's different, of course, but there are some states that require biographical affidavits for all officers and even background checks and fingerprints for each officer of the RPG.
So what has been the most officers that you've seen that have to be listed on an RPG?
I've had a client that has had 12 officers and we had to do 12 background checks. And if they've ever lived internationally, that makes it even harder because there has to be an international background check done.
So, what is the state that you would consider the most difficult to get your approval in?
I would say Florida is the most difficult. They require very specific answers on some questions, as well as the background checks that I was speaking about. And they have to be, the background checks can't just come from anyone, it has to be from an approved vendor from the state of Florida.
Spot On is sponsored by Insurance Licensing Services of America. Need help with corporate name changes, annual returns, or surplus lines tax filings? Feeling overwhelmed? If you're looking for experts in regulatory compliance, you've come to the right place. ILSA provides the industry with over 50 services. To learn more about the company and how they can help, visit ilsainc.com.
What would you say are the typical state filing fees?
A lot of states are actually free, like there's no fee at all. But other states do range from about $100 to $600.
So it can go pretty high up there.
Tracy, tell us about the amendments to the RPG.
The amendments are going to be a little bit different depending on what you're amending. So if you're changing your types of liability insurance that you're purchasing, or if you're changing who the group's actually covering, it'll be different depending on the state. There are states that have like some specific forms that must be completed, but most states you can just send like a written statement with all the changes along with whatever proof you have of the change.
Let's say a client comes to you and says that they want to have their RPG licensed in all states. Is that possible, or are there states that will not issue an RPG license?
Oh yeah, it's definitely possible, and it happens quite often. I'll say that, if you're looking to be registered in all states, that you need to give yourself some time because it is very time consuming.
How time consuming are we talking about, like from the date that all the registrations are submitted? Like what's the time frame?
Depending on how fast, your people can get all the information that's needed for the forms, I would say once you get everything to the state, it could take anywhere from 1 month to 3 months. And then there are some stragglers that take a little bit longer, so you just have to plan ahead. Like Florida could take a lot more time because you're waiting on the background checks and all that kind of stuff.
So nothing like just submitting a PNC application where sometimes you can get an application, a license issued in 24 to 48 hours.
Oh no, that's not happening. I wish it was.
Tracy, tell us about the renewal requirements. Is it more complicated than a PNC license renewal?
Oh yeah. Depending on the state, the RPG renewals can be simple, but a lot of them are kind of like the initial application. Some states require for purchasing groups to provide them with just a continuation fee, but there are some states that require you to submit both the renewal application, a renewal fee, and an annual report showing the premiums written for the previous year.
But once you submit that renewal, does it get renewed just on time, or is it does it take a while to get it approved again, since you said that some of them are kind of like the initial application?
It is just like a renewal. So when I say it's like an initial application, I don't mean they start you over. So it's just the forms are like the initial application. So normally they won't hold it against you if they have the forms at the state, and it's their process of going through it and getting the forms reviewed. They won't hold that accountable against you.
Tracy, one thing is you've dealt with tons of insurance personnel. Have you come across any insurance department staff member that's just been a pleasure to work with?
Oh, yes. And, I talk about Florida a lot. Maybe it's because I need to visit there. But although Florida is probably the most difficult state to get into, the two ladies.
You do have Disney World in there, and you do have kids. So
that's true. That's true. Maybe I need to make a trip to visit these ladies.
Yes.
But the two ladies that I've dealt with there are so sweet and very informative. Anytime I've had questions, Barbara Colville and Anna Traxler, those two would call me and just make sure I understood anything that I had questions on. And also another thing about Anna is I had an issue with California, and she actually I reached out to her to see if she had a contact at California, and she did. And she actually got in touch with someone at California for me when we weren't able to.
How cool. Coast to
Yeah.
coast service.
Yes,
That's
yes.
very, very cool.
Tracy, I want you to drop the mic. I'm kidding. I want you to drop a ray of insight on our circle of professionals. What advice can you share with someone out there that's just entering or just recently entered the industry?
I will say, don't be scared. Ask questions and always utilize the state employees. You can never learn too much whenever it comes to insurance compliance.
Tell me, if an agency comes to you today and says, again, they want to have their RPG licensed in all states, and they're just forming this RPG, are there any issues that they should know about, like with name requirements? Do they have some minimal capital requirement that they should know?
As far as name requirements and capital, no, I haven't seen anything like that. However, I have seen issues where an RPG is, let's say, domiciled in Illinois, and their business address is actually in California. We've seen issues where the statutes say your principal place of business has to be your domicile state. So, you want to make sure that you know the statutes within each state before you move forward with it, because it could cause a big mess of problems. We have something going on right now where this entity was domiciled in Illinois, and they are trying to get into the state of Florida, and Florida will not allow them to until they redomesticate to California, because California is actually their physical address and their principal place of business.
So now they're going to have to go through getting re-domiciled in a new state. So they're like going beyond, like square one.
Right. Yeah. It's a big reversal for them. They're going to have to undo a lot of things to correct just so they can get into one state.
So that's really important information to have, like at the onset of a project like this. It's kind of like knowing that. But, so many of them have already formed their entities, and they decide later on to form a risk purchasing group.
So Tracy, can you think of any of the pitfalls, some things that you experienced that had you scratching your head when you first started to learn this?
Just understanding all the things that were needed for an RPG, and what an RPG actually does. That was one of the main things that was different than, dealing with a TPA or an MGA or, a regular property and casualty agency. It was just understanding that it's only this group of people, dealing with this or purchasing this one type of liability, or this, these couple types of liability for this group. So I guess, just understanding what they're doing before you move into getting these registrations is a good thing to know.
Are these RPG applications being submitted to the same area typically that you deal with when you're submitting PNC and surplus lines applications?
No, generally you're working with the company licensing side and not the agent licensing side. So, if you call the agent licensing side hoping to get information, you're most likely going to get transferred to company licensing.
Okay, so you're actually dealing with the side that deals with the insurers and not the agencies. Good to know.
Yes.
Back in the day, for TPAs and MGA applications, I know we used to submit it like in a binder, like in a 3-ring binder. Tell me about the RPG submittal process. How is that submitted? Is it submitted by paper or electronically? What's the deal?
Well, there are still, 1 or 2 states that are very specific. They want, tabs and certain color paper.
So you're saying it is in a binder?
Well, yeah. So I will say, I think there's one state that has very specific information that you have to, ways that you have to put information in. And most of the states do require hard copies sent to them. But there are a couple of states that are getting over to opt-ins, and you can submit them electronically through opt-ins. I believe Hawaii just recently changed to submitting through opt-ins, and then Oklahoma is another state.
Okay, so I think we just covered 3 different ways to submit RPG applications. One is a binder with tabs and whatnot. The other is submitting it by paper, which sounds like most of the states still require it by paper. And then the third is electronically through opt-ins.
Yes, and Florida also, they don't use opt-ins, but they have their own portal that you would submit it through.
Okay.
Good to know.
That's been such great information, Tracy.
Tracy, thank you so much for joining us on Spot On. Some of our circle of professionals, they may need help with this stuff. They may be listening to this and say, well, how do I get in touch with Tracy? So how do they contact you?
Well, you can find me on LinkedIn, or you can give me a call at 254-729-6141 at ILSA. My name is Tracy with an I, so Traci, and then Houston, like the city, Houston.
Did you already share with us your email address?
No, I did not. So my email address at ILSA is t.houston, Houston, at ILSAINC.com.
That's t.houston at ilsainc.com. Tracy, thank you so much for joining us today on Spot On Insurance.
Thank you for having me.
Don't forget to join us next week as we discuss how the insurance industry can best prepare for InsurTechs with Dr. Robin Kira, widely recognized as one of the top InsurTech and FinTech thought leaders and influencers of our time.
Visit spotoninsurance.com, where you'll discover an ever-growing library of podcasts, videos, articles, and online tools by professionals for professionals to enhance your insurance education. By the way, that's where you'll also find our podcast notes and bonus resources. Please don't forget to click the iTunes link to rate and review, and let others know what you think of Spot On Insurance. Thank you for joining us, and we'll catch you next week.